Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a good last 3 weeks. Even if you did not, it's a journey and it's a process. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, right? Yes. So today we are going to talk about carbohydrates and sugars. Last time we talked about fats. You know, we know that there is good fats, right? The omega-3 and omega-6, the anti-inflammatory, non-saturated fats. And who has not been here for the first two? So the first topic, we were talking about the general program. So to lose weight and to control diabetes and other chronic diseases, we used at least 4 general principles here. Nutrition, mostly plant-forward eating, which our body is designed for. Exercise, how good it is to help us control our chronic diseases. And then the third part of the principle is behavior modification. We learned that willpower, our own willpower, will not be able to carry us through except if we rely on the power of the higher Holy Spirit, right? And then number 4 is building spiritual strength. You know, it always works hand in hand. So on our second meeting, we expounded more on exercise. We found out that even daily walking exercise as much as 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, can actually decrease the heart attack rate by 50%. But of course, we know if you can't walk that long for 30 minutes, the best way is to start where you are and progress, okay? The thing is, it's consistency to develop the habit. And you will find out that if you are only able to walk for 5 minutes this time, next month you will be surprised. You will be able to walk maybe 10 times, 10 minutes, right? And then the third week last week was about fats. And today we're going to talk about carbohydrates. How many of you here are afraid to eat carbs? I'm glad no one else, right? Because there's such some misconception about carbohydrates. So we're going to clear that idea today, okay? So carbohydrates are actually our instant energy source for our body. It does not necessarily build muscle or bone, but it gives us energy, okay, to move our muscles, for our brain to think. For every cell in our body to function, we need carbohydrate, which is turned into glucose. But the other side of it, if we eat excess of the carbohydrate that our body need for energy, it will be turned into fat, okay? And we'll look into how it's being done. Most of the excess carbohydrates or excess food that we eat turns into fat. A little bit of the carbohydrates that we eat is stored as glycogen. We'll talk about it more. All right, so amylopectin is a starch structure in plants. Glycogen is the excess carbs that we eat that are useful for us for an instant access of energy, okay? And this is stored in the liver and in the muscle. Have you heard about that glycogen? So when we run a marathon, we usually be depleted of our carbohydrate as source of energy. But if we have this glycogen in our liver and in our muscles, then we can continue to do the work of running, okay? So this is a sample of a starch molecule, okay, a complex starch. You see how many fibers it is? It's composed of chains of sugar or glucose into a long chain. So these fibers will help it to not spike your sugars. So to see carbohydrates, every carbohydrate that we eat turns into sugar. So potatoes, oats, pastas, but do not be afraid, sugar or glucose is what we need. So if we eat half a cup of potatoes, that's a good thing because it turns into sugar or glucose that what we need, okay? So the thing here is how complex it is. So it is not as opposed to just plain white sugar, it makes your blood sugar right away rise up. But when it's complex, like this complex carbohydrates, it doesn't spike your sugar. So for instance, simple sugars, those complex starch that I showed you, there are simpler forms of it. And one is, the good example is the cane sugar or the white sugar. So this cane sugar is only made of two structures, one glucose and one fructose. Okay, and remember, glucose or sugar in the blood is the one that fuels our body, makes our brain think, makes our muscles move, okay? But this cane sugar is one part glucose and one part fructose. And milk sugar is one part glucose and one part galactose. And grain sugar is maltose, and it's mostly glucose and glucose, okay? So that's double structure sugar compared to the complex starch, which is a long chain of fibers. So what it is, so everything that we eat typically is turned into glucose, okay? Because glucose is the primary fuel for our body. So, again, the glucose is, powers the brain, powers the muscle, powers every single cell in our body. So let's take a look where do we normally get our glucose or sugar from. So this way it's like added sugar, okay? We're talking about added sugar here, not the complex starch, not the potato, not the brown rice, not the quinoa, okay? So you see, a sports drink like Gatorade could have as much as 2 teaspoons of sugar. Soda, 10 teaspoons of sugars. Orange soda.
My son said recently that they're now putting like 16 teaspoons of sugar in Coke and like soda drinks. He said they've actually upped it.
Well, I could believe that, and you have your devices there. You can actually Google it and see how many teaspoons actually. Yes, up to 17 teaspoons actually of sugars in the soda, okay? And how much we should be drinking, I will let you know how much added sugar is allowed to us. We're talking about added sugar, not the sugar that's coming from the complex starch, correct? So why is it important? Because if one sugary drink a day, it increases the chance of obesity or excess body weight by 27%. Just one.
Just one drink?
One sugary drink a day. How much more if you double it? I see so many patients drinking nothing but soda, all right?
And by that they mean 16 ounces, right?
Then that's 2 servings.
Yeah.
And so for diabetes, it reaches to 26% greater risk and not to mention tooth decay and a higher risk of heart disease as well. So this is from the research of American Heart Association. The average male gets 25 teaspoons added sugar, okay? Females, 18. What we should be eating or allowed? The American Heart Association allowed 9 teaspoons for male, 6 teaspoons for females a day. And going back to 1 soda, which is like an 8-ounce serving, how many sugar teaspoon is it already? It's anywhere from 10 to 17 teaspoons. So the allowed sugar could be taken in just 1 soda. Okay? Who drinks here juice? Let's go back to that slide. Juice, 12 teaspoons. So the allowable sugar for the day for either male and female could be already oversupplied by just 1 serving of juice. Okay, so the number 1 source of added sugars in our culture here is from soda. Next is from desserts, and even breakfast cereals are very high in sugar. So that's why when we look at cereals, we need to make sure that they have enough fibers on it, not just added sugars. So if we're talking about whole grain cereals, okay? So how does the body digest carbohydrates? Because we are talking about carbohydrates that are good for our body. Because remember, everything that we eat are usually turned into sugar or glucose. That is our main fuel for the body. So what we want is complex carbohydrates that has a lot of fibers, so it doesn't spike the sugar in the blood, okay? So, for instance, if we are going to eat a cookie, in 1 hour, the blood sugar raises above 200, okay? 1 cookie or 1 serving of soda, it goes up that way right away, okay? So any excess here, excess of 150 or 200, it goes into fat, okay? So what if we eat a complex pasta, like a whole wheat pasta? So you see it goes up a little bit, but not too much, okay? But what if we eat a whole grain sweet potato or brown rice? It doesn't even rise as much. So that's how important the carbohydrate source that is high in fibers. So fibers is our friend. The more fibers is the carbohydrate, the better it is for us. So comparing that, when we eat a sugary drink or snack, blood sugar rises up. And all this excess makes the blood diabetes worse and makes us gain weight. But if we eat a complex carbohydrate, it will just produce enough sugar to fuel us as our energy. Okay, what brings blood sugar down? Exercise. Water makes your body efficient in doing its job to break it down. But when typically our body is made so amazingly by God again, when we eat carbohydrates, our pancreas produces insulin. You know, when you have a diabetes that's poorly controlled, doctor resorts to giving insulin. Why? Because insulin brings the blood sugar down from the circulation, and if your body's working right, when we eat carbohydrates, the pancreas secretes insulin, and insulin tells the liver to get that excess sugar in the bloodstream and make it into triglycerides and store it into fat. Okay? So if we eat too much of carbohydrate or too much added sugar in our system, there will be a lot of fat storage, and the body doesn't use that much, so it stores into the hips, the trunk, the belly, the waist, right? And then the arms and the legs. So that will show up as an excess carbohydrates that we've been eating, or excess food in general. Okay? So comparing that, when we go back and eat sugary drink or food, there is a high chance of producing it into fat because there's a spike of the sugar. Okay? And this is just how much we need to move our body, to make our brain work, to make our heart beat, right? This is the energy that we need. So if we eat too much, it will get into fat storage. Okay? So, but if we eat a complex or whole grain pasta, it will go up a little bit, and so there's a little bit of excess, and so less fat storage. Okay? But if we eat very good complex sweet potato or brown rice, it will only rise up to as much as what we need. So there's no excess deposit of fat. So, have you heard about glycemic index? Okay? Glycemic index is a score that tells us how fast a food is turned into sugar. Okay? So, it's not shown usually not on the labels. It's not required on the labels right now. But it is very important to know the glycemic index of food for patients that have diabetes or someone who wants to lose weight. Because if you have excess sugar, it's deposited into fat, okay? So in your handout for today, there's a long list of foods with their glycemic index. So for us, if we want to control our diabetes, even our high cholesterol, our blood pressure, our weight, focus on the foods that has high glycemic index or low glycemic index, okay? Was it clear? Low glycemic index. So here it is. What is good is the ones that are 1 to 55 sugar or glycemic index, okay? So try to avoid foods that have 70 to 100. Maybe eat it occasionally, truly, when there is a big, celebration of a lifetime. But on a daily basis, try to focus on the low to medium. So let's talk about the glycemic index of sugar compared to honey, okay? So glucose is sugar, is the standard 100 glycemic index. So table sugar, because it's glucose and fructose, it has a glycemics of 70. But look, honey has a high glycemic index. Do you know where in the Bible it says that although honey is good, but we are not to eat so much of it? I think it's in Proverbs 25, right? Look at it. Proverbs 25 says, honey, do not eat it in excess, because science has shown that it actually has a high glycemic index. So, but honey is a good way to sweeten, but ideally 1 teaspoon at a time. Okay, 1 teaspoon into your tea, 1 teaspoon into your unsweetened cereal, for instance. Okay, 1 teaspoon.
Is that a day or is that week? Is that
a day? Because you remember, you are allowed, men are allowed, health-wise, 9 teaspoons a day. So
how many?
9 teaspoon a day, but you should spread it out. Because if you put 9 teaspoon of honey in one setting, your blood sugar goes high. Okay?
I'm saying amen to that.
So it's spread out. 1 teaspoon for breakfast, 1 teaspoon, 4 hours apart minimum.
I'm glad my wife got a good memory.
All right. I am surprised that agave actually has a lower glycemic index. Yes, ma'am.
What about date syrup?
Date syrup is the same thing here, but I don't actually know. You can Google it right now. What's the glycemic index of date syrup? Okay? So here, try to actually see what is the lowest glycemic index. Although honey, let me tell you though, although honey has a high glycemic index, that's why it's limited to 1 teaspoon, honey has other, how much?
Date syrup is 42 to 54.
42 to 54. But let me tell you though, even though honey has a high glycemic index, it has other medicinal effect, all right? It's antibacterial, it soothes, right? But the clue is in moderation. Not 9 tablespoons in one setting, right? 1 teaspoon. What we are trying to learn here is moderation and actually controlling our appetite, right? Because the first temptation of the enemy that made Adam and Eve booted out of Eden is because of appetite. So, and the spirit of prophecy says that if you actually can tame your appetite, you will do well with every other temptation. Okay? So that is just a quick reminder, okay? Now, let's take a look at the glycemic index of starches. So, look here. If you get your whole grain spaghetti al dente, it has less glycemic index. So, the more you cook it into very soft one, it becomes more sugary. Why is that? When you do it al dente, am I doing the right term? Like how, firm, right? When it's firm, your body has to digest it more. Whereas if it's mushy, it's going to be higher because you don't have to digest. The stomach doesn't have to digest, okay? Look at it. Baked potato has lower glycemic index than the instant mashed potato. Why is that? It has less fibers now, okay? And the best one, actually, is the best starch, is sweet potato or the yam, okay? So this is the secret of the Japanese people being in the blue zone diet. Women there, they maintain a good weight because they eat sweet potato as their main source of starch. Why is that? It has a very complex fibers. So when you eat it, it takes a long time to digest, and so the sugar is released slowly. And one thing that I learned recently is the best way to cook sweet potato is to boil them or steam them, okay? Not baked, not fried, but steam them or boil, and then the starch there become even more resistant if you cool it down first. So the best is to actually batch cook it, okay? It makes life easy too. Instead of grabbing a bread, grab the sweet potato that's in the refrigerator, because if you cool it down, it actually has become more complex. So less release of sugar. Yes, ma'am.
So are you boiling or steaming that with like the peel on? Or?
Yes, you wanna I do it with a peel on because it makes it steady, right? You know, because if you boil it without it, it becomes mushy. So at least with the skin on, it contains it. Okay? So instead of grabbing a bread, a bagel, or white rice, sweet potato. Okay? And then yam is usually the Japanese sweet potato. It's even less glycemic index. And what's good with this one? If they have a lot of fibers, it makes you feel full, and so therefore makes you eat less. Okay? So how about fruits? What's the glycemic index of fruits? So, raw apple. Okay, that's why an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Here, as you can see, the more ripe the fruits, especially like banana, for instance, they have higher glycemic index. So for patients that have diabetes or trying to lose weight, try to learn how to eat the unripe, okay? Even for mangoes, you know, do the green mangoes, or, you know, or just eat small amount of it, okay? And here, juices has higher sugar than the fruit itself. Why again? Because of the fibers. You know, juice, they take out the fiber, okay? Or if you like to drink the fruit, make it into a smoothie where the fiber is still there. Because the fiber is the one that makes the sugar go slower release. And no spike. Watermelon has a high index here. It's a good thing, but just don't overeat it if you have, you know, diabetes, or if you're wanting to lose weight. How about vegetables? So you can see here, raw carrots, very low glycemic index. But when you cook the carrots, it becomes high. Again, because it's not, your body doesn't have to work on it anymore. So it's released as sugar right away, faster. And look at beans, lentils. Okay? So have you noticed the foods that are naturally low in sugar are the cheapest also?
No.
Potatoes, sweet potato, lentils, carrots, raw. Can you see how God really wants us to be healthy?
Yes.
If we just pay attention, you can save money right now, and you can save money for expenditure for sickness down the line too, right? My husband always tells, like, you know, usually in America here, at the last years of their life, all their finances are spent on healthcare.
Oh, God.
And we're not supposed, we can do away with that if we start depositing health now, so that as we grow older, we can again withdraw health instead of sickness. So it's like a bank account. The more healthful habits we deposit right now, we can withdraw health as we grow older. But if we deposit unhealthful habits right now, 10, 20 years later, we could expect to withdraw sickness. That is what's happening mostly around us here. And we are given a chance and the tools not to be that, okay? So what about glycemic index for baked goods? What do you think? High. Why do you think it's high? Yes, because it calls for a lot of sugars. Can you imagine? Let's take a look. One donut. And when I eat donut, I don't stop with one. I eat like almost the whole box. So therefore, I don't want to buy it, because if I see it, I have a seafood diet, right? Who else has a seafood diet here? That's why I better not see it. Right? So here, when you have a whole grain oat added to your muffin, so it makes the glycemic index a little better. But it doesn't mean that you want to eat a whole lot of it either, right? How about bread? Let's take a look. So white bread has a high glycemic index. You know why? Why is a white bread has a high glycemic index? They're stripped of the fibers, right? So look, but if you do barley bread that has whole kernels on it, okay? So the glycemic index is low. I experimented yesterday. I made a bread out of lentil. Well, I cheated a little bit because I have a friend in one church. She sells like flour for bread making. And one time I made it straight and it was so sweet. So I added 2 cups of cooked lentils to my bread flour. So at least I added fibers on it. Okay? How about cereals? You know, I remember the first, remember who was the first person to develop cereal? Kellogg's. And he was one of the Seventh-day Adventist pioneers or early on, right? So he made cereals, and it was, in the very beginning, it was really corn cereal, like whole corn. But now it has become more processed or brand cereal. So let's see. So the original old brand Kellogg's, low glycemic index. But now the appetite of people are really hijacked by sugary processed foods. No one really eats this anymore, right? They want to go for this is the most popular. Look at the glycemic index, okay? So this kind of things, they're meant for fast life, easy, fast, but it's also easy to get chronic diseases. So there are certain ways that we can, but if you're somewhere else and they only have this, so look for the ones that has high fibers, just in case.
So are we, because me and my wife, we look for things that they tell you on the label, certain added ingredients that we look for to make sure we don't eat those type of cereals.
Mm-hmm.
So what else will we be looking for in our cereal do you have that'll help us out so that we can eat the proper type of cereal?
That's a really good question. In general, if the cereal has only 5 or less ingredients that you can also pronounce, if you cannot pronounce it, it's probably a chemical made in the laboratory. Okay, and then look for, if like in a cereal, I don't have a slide here, but when you look at it, it has the ingredients or the calories with it. So if it has 40 grams of carbohydrate, make sure you have more than 4 grams of fibers to it. So the ratio is 1 fiber for every 5 to 10 grams of carbohydrate. Okay?
1 fiber.
For every 5 to 10 grams of carbohydrate.
Because they all wheat, supposed to quote unquote wheat products are made from that type of bread.
Yes. But listen to your body, because there are people now that are sensitive to wheat even, okay? Because wheat is one of the produce that is genetically modified. So the genetically modified wheat actually produces more sugar or more starch per gram, okay? Because they made it in such a way to produce more starch. So listen to your body, because to me, I had become sensitive to wheat, to gluten. So if I eat a lot of it consecutively, my body will tell me, okay? So listen to your own body, because not all are sensitive to the genetically modified wheat. But the general principle that we're trying to teach here is eat food as close as to the original form that God made. So if it has become a cereal, is there a cereal tree?
No.
Is there a bread tree? Right. Okay, so glycemic index will help us maintain a good weight, makes the diabetes better control, decreases heart disease because it will not make us more get triglycerides or cholesterol in the body, okay? And it will also actually prolong your physical endurance because your sugar is slowly released. The more when you move, you will have the energy to move at the right time that you need it, nothing in excess. Because whatever in excess at a given time, it turns into fat. So what about non-nutritive sweeteners? Can you take a look at that emphasis? Non-nutritive. So no nutrient.
No.
It's just an artificial chemical, right? So what do they do? Is this good for us? It turns out that they are. So why do people use non-nutritive or artificial sweeteners? What do you think is the purpose?
They use it because they think it's better than the regular sugar.
Yes.
And they like the taste of sugar, actually.
Yes.
So they want it to taste similar to what they were drinking.
Okay. So because generally the purpose is so that people will not eat sugar or will stop liking sugar. Okay. But it turns out these non-nutritive artificial sweeteners are actually 300 to 600 times sweeter than sugar. So does that actually make you not like sweets anymore?
No.
So what they actually find out in this study,
Crazy.
right? They actually makes all this worse. Why? Because it actually makes us eat more. Okay? So in this study of over 80,000 women followed for almost 12 years, women using, artificial sweeteners, what do they found out? So if they drink, for this instance, diet drinks, more than 2 per day, they actually increase the risk of dying from heart attacks by 94%. Can you imagine that? And from all cause of death mortality, they increased by 50%. One non-nutritive or artificial diet drink, okay? So this study, low carb versus low fat in weight loss, okay? Which do you think is good? What have you heard about?
No carbs.
Low carb versus low fat. Let's take a look. So what is a low carb diet was considered unhealthy? Low carb, unhealthy. If most of the fat is coming from saturated fats and the protein is coming from animal protein and the carbs is coming from refined carbohydrates, okay? And what is considered healthy low-fat diet? If the protein is mostly coming from plants, the fats is coming from polyunsaturated fats, the omega-3, omega-6, walnuts, nuts and seeds, avocado, okay? And the carbs are coming from complex carbohydrates, sweet potato, brown rice, quinoa, okay? So let's see what happened. So let's look at here. People who are eating the unhealthy low-carb diet, they have higher risk of dying, 38% higher. But look at here, the low-fat diet that is healthy, they have 4% lower risk. Okay? So, whether low fat or low carb, as long as the source is from whole food and the right combination, balance, it's good. All right, they did also a study on, because we're talking about carbohydrate, how is it good for us, correct? So we should not be afraid of carbohydrate because they're the main source of glucose, which is our main fuel. So here is a study of carbohydrates in the diet for healthy aging. Healthy aging is reaching to 70 without chronic disease, with good memory, no physical limitations, and good mental health, okay? So it's a big study, 47,000 women, followed for 32 years. At the end of the study, they were 70 to 93 years old. Let's look what happened here. So the more they eat, 55.5% of what they're eating are from carbohydrates. Look, people who are eating carbohydrates, they have more healthy people, 32% more healthy than the lower eating carbohydrate. So, but if they do whole grains, they're even more healthy, older 70 years old. But look, if they eat carbohydrates mostly from added sugars or artificial, processed foods, they have less healthy aging. Okay? So in general, eat less sugary foods, drink less sugary drinks, eat more whole fruit, complex carbs. Can you tell me, who can tell me the complex carbs that we talk about today that's cheap and healthy for you? What you learned today? Sweet potatoes and yam, right? The complex carbs. The less cooked pasta, whole pasta, the raw carrots instead of cooked carrots, right? Don't eat more than you need. Okay, so eat just enough for us. And then the timing also is very important. Not eating late at night. Why do you think it's important? What do we do at night? We sleep. We don't need to move our muscles. Therefore, we have less energy need at night. Okay? So load all your meals during breakfast. So that's why it's eat like a king for breakfast, eat like a queen for lunch, and then eat like a pauper for dinner. What does a pauper eat?
Beans and rice.
Sometimes nothing, right? So 2 meals a day, breakfast, big, and then lunch, and then very small amount for dinner. All right, that's the end of our session 4. Pastor William will come in to give us a spiritual talk. But in your scoring, do you have, before Pastor William comes, do you have any question for your scoring? Are you getting good at it? Yeah? And then the other thing is, if you are interested what your scores mean, okay? We have on the first, I think, in the helper's handout, we have this interpretation, okay? So for instance, if you want a copy, like if you look at your vertical score, for day 1, if your score is 30 and above, it's a good score. And if you have, so it's kind of interpreting what it is, so you know how to improve it or not. And you can also score it horizontally. Okay? So if you are interested, Sister Sandra can make copies for you, okay? So that you will be able to interpret your scores on a weekly basis. All right. Any question?
Are we gonna do the sugar quiz or no?
We can do the sugar quiz. I think Darlene has to go.
Yes, she's already gone. I think she's already gone.
Okay.
Out.
So we can do the quiz before. All right. On page 4. Page 4. True or false? Glucose is essential for life. Yes, we just say it's the main fuel for our body. And where does glucose comes from? From what we eat? Is it from fat, protein, or carbs? Carbs, right? Table sugar contains glucose. Yes, it's glucose and fructose. A high sugar meal or snack will raise your blood sugar? Yes. That's why we want to avoid that. A high sugar, diet soda increases the risk of a stroke more than regular sodas. Why? Because eventually it leads you to eat more. Okay? Very good. And number 6, diabetics have abnormally high blood sugars. Right? Sugar has less impact on your metabolism if taken with a complex meal. That's right. Why? Why would a complex meal help the blood sugar not to go up? Because of the fibers, right?
Sister Hannah, did we do number 4?
Number 4, a high sugar meal or snack will raise your triglycerides. Why is it that it will raise your triglycerides? Because excess sugar will be turned by the liver into triglycerides. And that's one of the markers we check for the risk for heart attack and stroke. Okay? So excess sugars turn into triglycerides. Where are we? 9. Sugar is addicting for some people. I was about to say false because it's for everyone. It is addicting to everyone, not just. Remember the story about the mice put into a cage, one with sugar liver and the other cocaine? Where does the mice go more? 8 times more in the sugar, right? So that's why in kids, we have to actually train them not to be addicted to sugar because it's going to be hard for them to get rid of it. Okay? So it's for everybody, young, old. If you reduce your total caloric intake to lose weight, it doesn't matter how much you cut back on fats, protein, and carbohydrates. So you actually would like to cut back more on fat, eat more carbs, right? Up to 55.5% of calories eaten from carbs. Complex carbs is actually better. Your protein about 30% and your fat about 10%. Okay? So it matters which one. So you want to repeat it? Fat, 10%. Carbs, 55 to 60%. And protein, 30%. Okay? Right. Next, losing weight is more effective in preventing obese people from becoming diabetic than taking the medication metformin. Yeah, we did not actually discuss it, but it's true. Lifestyle trumps medication. But medication and lifestyle, for some that it cannot, it works better if someone. Okay, 13. Most of the extra sugar in the U.S. diet come from True, right? Okay, there is another question there about page 4. Look at the eating more sugars result in more heart attacks and strokes, right? Question 1. What is the percentage increase in the risk of dying of a heart attack or stroke for those who have 14% of their calories from added sugar in the diet? So look at the graph with 14%. Their risk of dying from heart attack or stroke is 20%, 23% higher.
Excuse me, Sister Hannah, you said that's another page for this?
Yeah, it's on page, page 6.
Okay. Thank you.
Page 6. Okay, everybody there? So now question number 2. What percentage of the daily calories came from added sugar for those who experienced nearly 50% increase in mortality from heart attacks and stroke? 18%. Look at the graph for 18%. It becomes 1.49. So that's about 50% increase risk. Third question. What is the percentage increase in the risk of dying of a heart attack or stroke for those who get 25% of their daily calories from added sugar?
143%.
That's right, 143%. Okay, so the idea is to minimize added sugar at all. Ideally, only 6 teaspoons for women, 9 teaspoons for men. All right, is there any other question there? Okay. You can go to your list, so that would be your assignment, because there is a list of the GI down on the few pages after.
Pages 9 and 10.
Yeah, you can go and look at it, okay? All right, so I will give you Pastor William for a spiritual talk, and then later we can just form one group. Okay, all right, thank you.